Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
I, Jake Reynolds, met Maya Caldwell in downtown Phoenix, just a few blocks from the Roosevelt Row Arts District after an Arizona Diamondbacks game in 2015. We were both 27 years old at the time. It was a warm spring Friday afternoon and the Diamondbacks had just swept a 3-game series against the Dodgers. Phoenix was alive with energy. Maya stood out. She had a presence that turned heads the moment she walked into a room. Tall at 59, with mid-back-length dark brown hair and striking hazel eyes, she carried herself with confidence. She had an athletic build, a small waist, and a natural grace that made her impossible to ignore. Everywhere she went, people took notice. She was simply stunning. Maya had been drinking all day. Guys were buying her beers at the game and then afterward in the bar across the street from Chase Field. She started with mimosas, then moved on to vodka tonics. By nightfall, she was swacked, and more than one guy in that bar was making plans to force his affections on this partying dream girl. I was out on the streets, sharing the gospel, handing out pamphlets, talking to the homeless and the crowds passing by outside the stadium. I'd been there most of the afternoon, and overall it had been a good day. By around 9:30 p.m., I was standing in front of a bar across from Chase Field, ready to call it a night. As I walked to my Honda Accord in the parking lot, I noticed 4 men aggressively handling a young woman just a row over from where I was parked. She was clearly intoxicated and struggling, but it was obvious she wasn't a willing participant in what was happening. They were overpowering her, ignoring her attempts to resist. One of them struck her several times, telling her to stop fighting and that it would be easier for her if she didn't resist. At that moment, whatever peaceful restraint I had disappeared. In my trunk, I had a 3.5-foot metal pipe that I used for holding up signs while I preached. I grabbed it, ran toward them, and swung. The first man's shoulder shattered under the impact. Before the others even realized what was happening, I struck again, and one of them collapsed, lifeless. The third man tried to block the next blow, but the force broke his forearm and wrist. Screaming in pain, he stumbled away and fled. The fourth man, realizing what was happening, grabbed the woman, Maya, and held her between us. He pulled out a knife and pressed it to her throat. She looked at me in terror, injured and barely clothed, with bruises on her face and blood trickling from her nose and mouth. I met her eyes, raised my pipe, and told her, "Drop." She fell to the ground just as I swung. The last attacker collapsed. The fight was over in an instant. Maya lay on the ground, bleeding from a wound on her shoulder. It wasn't deep enough to hit an artery and she was still breathing and speaking, but panic took hold of her. I knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders firmly, and told her she was going to be okay. Somehow, despite the chaos, she believed me. Her breathing steadied. The immediate danger had passed. Phoenix police showed up about that time and disarmed me with practiced ease. They ground my face into the pavement, twisted my arms up behind me, and about 3 of them sat on me, keeping me from breathing and thereby resisting. When they were satisfied that the fight was out of me, they cuffed me and dragged me away. I did not see Maya again for several days. I was in interrogation for 18 hours. After all, 2 men were dead, 2 more seriously injured, and a girl had been beaten and assaulted. They had sorting out to do. It was good that I had not been drinking. It was good that my pants were zipped up and fastened, and the other 4 men all were in various stages of nakedness below their waists. All the guys tested above legal limits, and Maya was 4 times above the legal limit for alcohol in her system. Finally, it came out that I was the good guy and she, the victim, sort of. The other 4 were doing dastardly things. Channels 5, 8, and 12 were reporting the next night things like, "A knight in shining armor. A street preacher, no less. Saves a woman from a vicious attack, killing 2 and injuring 2. Details at 11. The district attorney and the police chief had a joint press conference and said it wasn't gang-related, that all the men were local. They announced that no charges were being filed against me, but charges would be filed against the 2 surviving attackers for aggravated assault and against Maya for public intoxication and disorderly conduct. After a few days, Channel 12 asked me to do a sit-down interview with them and told me I could tell my story in my own words. They said the public wanted to know more about me. When I got to the station and into the studio, Maya was seated there also. This was going to be a dual interview and Channel 12 got the scoop, both she who was attacked and he who rescued her, sitting there in one interview. Their ratings would soar. My face was still pretty banged up and her eyes were swollen nearly shut. She had bruises on her cheeks, forehead, and bandages on her shoulder. We must have looked like quite the sight on television. For her part, Maya admitted to having partied all day. She, being a huge Diamondbacks fan, just let the partying get away from her. She told of drinking all afternoon at the game and then at the bar, everyone was buying her drinks. She told of drinking all afternoon at the game and then at the bar, everyone was buying her drinks. She was so obviously hot just sitting there in the interview that everyone understood her not having to buy her own drinks. She related how the guys all grabbed her and kind of walked her out to the parking lot. Lots of groping and staggering was happening, she said. Then they started to get rough, put their hands on her, tearing at her clothing, and she started to resist and scream. It was going bad for me, she stated, and then the next thing I knew, I was looking at him with a wild expression on his face and a raised pipe in his hands, and one of my attackers had me around the waist with a knife to my throat. She told the interviewer that I had told her to drop, and she did. As I swung the pipe, she said she was cut by the knife, but not too seriously because as she dropped, she pushed his arm away. She said she felt very lucky for that and appreciated that I had risked my own safety to help her. Then the interviewer asked me to relate what happened from my point of view. Before I could answer, she asked if I had been drinking and what I was doing there at that hour. I was preaching the gospel, witnessing to the lost, I said. The interviewer snickered at that and rushed me through the interview, kind of rudely interrupting me and not really wanting to know too much of what I was about. After that, I noticed that Maya was quietly crying while I was talking. Interview over, I headed for the door of the TV station, looking to put some time and distance between me and this horrible event and its players. Maya caught me in the parking lot, though, and insisted that I talk to her, that I accept her thanks, and that I not disappear without her getting to talk to me some more. Being an itinerant preacher, I always look for an opportunity to talk to people, so I relented and agreed to have a meal with this lovely, no, this beautiful creature. It turns out that Maya's father was one of the super rich. There was a lot of tech and innovation going on in Arizona, and he was one of the movers and shakers. They had a house in Paradise Valley, box seats at the Cardinals, Suns, Coyotes, and Diamondbacks games. Big sports fans, the whole family, Maya most of all. I really had nothing much in the way of material things. What I did have, I invested in my street ministry. I had been in the military, deployed to Iraq for 2 tours and 1 in Afghanistan. I'd seen enough to know that I didn't want to live the military life. I wanted to be a force for peace and greater understanding among people if I could. I'd seen killing and death. Some of it, I did not like the look on the face of the dead. I was trying to put it behind me, perhaps atone for some of my transgressions. At the very least, I wanted to encourage people to find a more excellent way, away from what we all seem to be slipping into. That night, the night of Maya's beating, I dropped the ball on my own standards. Oh, wretched man that I am. That which I would rather not do, I do it. That which I want to do, I don't do it. Violence is the first resort of the coward, the last resort of the brave. Still, to protect someone from abuse was my duty. There were 4 of them, and that meant the odds were stacked against me. So deadly force in my training and makeup was justifiable. I am 63, and I weigh 215 pounds. I am kind of an imposing figure, I've been told. I have dark blonde hair and light brown eyes, broad shoulders, and narrow hips with a flat stomach. My complexion is clear, and I have a ready smile. I have been told by lots of folks that I am quite good-looking, just saying. At this point, Maya told me that her dad wanted to meet me and asked if she could take me over to their house. I said, "I'll just follow you." "How's that?" We were still in the TV station parking lot. I got to her house, and it was quite the mansion. It had a big circular driveway, lots of bedrooms, a library, a dining room, a sitting room, and who knows what all. This was a big house. Her dad and mom were in the kitchen. They were working together to make lunch. Maya had apparently called ahead to tell them we were on our way. I was kind of shocked to see people with this kind of wealth preparing their own food and doing it together. They welcomed me after Maya introduced me as Jake Reynolds, the man who saved my life and virtue with gracious, good words, and invited me to sit down and enjoy lunch with them. They had prepared tuna salad with sliced fresh veggies, radishes, green onions, tomatoes, celery, baby carrots, and 12 grain bread. They served it with ice-cold tea. I had 4 sandwiches, it was so good. They watched and smiled as I ate and ate. There were lots of signals going between Maya and her dad throughout lunch. Their eye contact and facial expressions were remarkable and something to watch. So much was being said without words. I wondered what in the world I was in the middle of. Maya finally excused herself to use the bathroom. A few minutes later, her dad also excused himself, pleading the need to relieve himself. Obviously, they had several bathrooms. Maya's mom and I were left there at the table and the silence was uneasy. We just made small talk for 15 minutes until Maya and her dad both reappeared at the same time, together, back in the kitchen. I said, "Well, it sure was nice to meet you folks. I don't want to keep you any longer, so I'll just be on my way now. Thanks for lunch, and Maya, I wish the best for you in the future. Take care of yourself. I think those bruises on your face will heal and you will soon find that you are still as pretty as you ever were." Her dad said, "Whoa, boy. I asked Maya to bring you here so we could have a chance to visit. I'd like to chat with you for a bit if you don't mind." I replied, "Well, sure, sir. What do you want to say?" He chuckled and said, "Let's go into my den and sit down for a spell, Jake." "Okay?" I shrugged and nodded my head yes. He and I left the two women and went into his study, and he motioned for me to sit in an expensive, overstuffed leather armchair. He took a seat opposite me with a coffee table between us. As we sat down, he looked me over, then asked, "What are you doing with your life?" "I'm a street preacher, Mr. Caldwell," I humbly replied. "That I defended your daughter was not because of her so much as that I was there, and it was happening. She could have been anyone, and I'd have done the same. It was just being there when I was, and that it was happening when I was there, no more." "I realize that, Jake, my boy," he said. "But the fact is that it was my daughter you saved. It wasn't some other woman. So it is my desire to find some way to reward your act of bravery and honor toward my daughter. Besides, she thinks you're too cute to let get away and wants me to find a way to hire you to keep you around for a while." He chuckled. "Mr. Caldwell, I have a job and a calling." "Thank you, but I need to be going now. Honestly, sir, you owe me nothing. Your daughter doesn't interest me even though she is quite striking and beautiful. Every man she meets is after her, and she is a bit wild. I don't need or want that kind of complication in my life, sir," I stated honestly. "She isn't wild, Jake. She acts the part because the men that are after her all expect her to be wild. Truthfully, she is quite docile and enjoys just being at home as much as going out. She likes sports because she was an athlete in high school and college. The jocks that hang around those events all think she's a groupie, but she isn't. She doesn't go out that often, just follows the various local teams avidly, that's all. That night, it just got out of hand. She let her guard down and the wolves were there to devour her, as you saw," he said. "Have you never slipped up? Have you never regretted your actions when things came at you too fast, and you did things differently than your own sense of values determined? So, you're telling me she wants to date me?" "What?" I asked. "Well, I think she would like an opportunity to spend a little time with you, to get to know you, have you get to know her." "Is that possible?" Mr. Caldwell replied. "You saved her life, son. You were the single only man ever in her life. Other than me, of course, who did not try and get in her pants. She is intrigued, infatuated at least, with you. She respects you and can't bear the thought of you getting away before she gets a good look at you. Maya and I dated for a while. I did not give up my street preaching, though. She wasn't really into it for herself and didn't necessarily agree with what I preached. But she thought I was hot and that I had principles she hadn't come across before. She saw honor in me, so she wanted to latch on to me while she could. We got married 7 months later. I was beginning to fall in love, and for a while, things were good. She wasn't a heavy drinker and was more reserved than she seemed in public, just like her dad had said. She liked to stay home with me, to garden, cook, and do things together. She always attended the home games of our local professional teams and sat in her box seats. I did not attend those games with her because I was on the streets looking after God's sheep. We really didn't have much in common. I would go out on the streets and preach almost every evening, but she wouldn't come with me. She did not feel comfortable doing that, so she stayed behind. It was sort of my job. People were supporting me through donations, so I had some income, but mostly our money came from her folks. I had made it clear from the beginning I wasn't able to support a wife. I was just a preacher sent to the poor. If I had a wife, she'd have to adapt. We would live like we preached. She seemed glad to do that, though I know it was a sacrifice. But my life was a sacrifice, so she was well apprised of what I was all about long before she considered me as a mate. She knew up front that material things just held no sway over me. She told me she was happy to have me as her husband and honored to be a part of a divine work. So I was content to go on with my ministry. Her folks were more than happy to supply her with cash as she needed it. It kept her close and at their beck and call. I loved her as much as I could. She got all of me that I had left after my commitment to the ministry. She loved her sports, and I got all of her that she had left after her commitment to the sport of the season. It was just the way it was. Despite being strikingly beautiful, Maya was surprisingly distant in our intimate moments. No matter how much effort I put in, I never felt like I truly connected with her. She remained still, barely reacting, as if it simply wasn't something that interested her. She had an undeniable presence. She turned heads wherever she went. But behind closed doors, she seemed detached. She enjoyed affection on her terms, often playfully touching me, but showed little interest in reciprocation. It was frustrating. While she never denied me closeness, there was no real enthusiasm, no genuine connection. It was just the way she was. So, she had her sports teams and I had my street ministry. After 3 years of married life, I was preaching most nights of the week from about 5:30 p.m. to midnight on the streets. I was enjoying a certain amount of success, measured by acceptance, not dollars. Lately, the Cardinals were playing, and they had a Sunday night game that week. The crowds were huge. The fans went to different downtown bars after the games than the Diamondbacks fans. Many of these Cardinals bars were on the southern end of downtown and right on Roosevelt Street. I decided to move my witnessing over to the Roosevelt area, kind of walk up and down the district and see who I could find to talk to. It was normal for me to do this. I moved to the Footprint Center area when the Suns played, to the Chase Field area when the Diamondbacks played, and to the southern part of downtown when the Cardinals played. Again, this night, our team had won in front of a national audience, and the fans were rocking. It was party time. The bars were full, and the streets were buzzing with people having a good time. The bars were full, and the streets were buzzing with people having a good time. After the game was over for about an hour or more, I spotted a group of the Arizona Cardinals in one of the bars. I moseyed over, knowing they'd attract a crowd and maybe an opportunity for me to strike up a conversation with someone. I hung around the edge of the crowd, listening to the partying, the laughing, and seeing all the drinking. The men in the crowd inside the bar were egging someone on. They must have had a cheerleader or some groupie chick in there, and she was entertaining them. They were whistling, yelling, and encouraging her to take it off, baby. There was lots of loud, wild partying going on. I couldn't see into the bar at all, but I had an idea of what kind of scene was playing out. After about 40 minutes of this wild ruckus, I could tell the girl was moving. It sounded like she was heading outside onto the sidewalk. I decided to get a little closer and see what was going on. I stood by the door just as Maya Caldwell, now Wilson, my wife of 3 years, stumbled out of the bar, barely able to walk in her spiked golden heels. Her outfit was in complete disarray, her bra askew, her tiny skirt barely covering anything, and her hair a tangled mess. She was clearly beyond drunk, swaying unsteadily as she moved. In her intoxicated state, she was clinging to every man around her, laughing, kissing them, letting them touch her as she leaned into their embrace. Then she turned and came face to face with me. Just inches apart, she leaned in as if to kiss me, but as recognition dawned in her glassy, unfocused eyes, she shrieked in shock, losing her balance. She tipped backward only to be caught by a stranger before she hit the pavement. Her makeup was smudged, her flushed skin glistening with sweat from all the dancing and movement. Her clothes were in complete disarray, and her unsteady stance made it clear just how far gone she was. I had never seen her like this before, and in that moment, everything about the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. Quietly, I left. I turned and walked away. I did not speak. Nobody but she and I knew who we were to each other. I walked back to my Toyota Camry, drove to our little house in Scottsdale that her parents had bought us, and packed my 3 bags and suitcases. I had gotten the point this time. I wasn't going to resort to violence. She wasn't worth it, and I didn't see her struggling to stop it. I saw her being pleased by other men, and I knew that I couldn't please her at all. I saw what I needed to see. It was very painful indeed. Now, what I needed to do was begin the process of healing, and that starts with prayer and self-examination. My realization of what I needed to do was instantaneous. I went to the Mission downtown and got a cot. I continued my street ministry and immersed myself in it, forgetting that I even had a wife. I did not seek a divorce, and I did not care whether she did or not. I brought nothing into the marriage, so I really had nothing to take from it. She wanted the marriage, got me to fall in love and go along with it, and now she wanted to soil it. It was hers to make and to destroy. I saw my job as keeping my heart pliable before God and not slipping into hatred for her. Honestly, I do feel special about something. I feel that I could have been really hurt, but I never felt that hurt. It seems surreal to me, like some spirit of God was shielding me from pain. I truly had committed my way to God and He was directing my path. I never heard from Maya or her folks. Just as well. I had nothing to say. I was busy and didn't have time for that kind of lifestyle. I was glad to be free from it, much as I am sure she was glad to be free from mine. About 1.5 years later, I saw Maya down by the Footprint Center in downtown Phoenix. She was partying and having a good time. She was still so pretty and she had guys all over her. It was what she wanted. I had come to realize a lot of attention and to be the center of everyone's fantasy was her narcotic of choice. To be with just one simple man wasn't her lifetime goal. She couldn't be satisfied with only one man when there were so many. It's okay, Maya. I'll still pray for you. Why hurt yourself with anger when someone else makes a mistake? After over 2 years without having any contact with the Caldwell family at all, I was in my room at the Phoenix Rescue Mission. I had been given free room and board there. They said that they recognized my work on the streets of Phoenix and knew that I was integral in their outreach to the homeless and helpless of Phoenix for the past 22 months. Somebody had been depositing $6,000 on the 5th day of the month into my personal account at Bank of America. As a minister, and especially as a street preacher, I came in contact with hundreds of people. I struck up conversations with so many from the down and out who were just waiting to die to the idle rich who were looking for some action, or people just traveling through my little patch of earth on a sidewalk outside of some venue or other. I had rejoiced with those who rejoiced. I had wept with those who mourned. And I had prayed with those who asked. It was my life's work. It was what I did. So, I figured that somebody I had ministered to along the way had hit it big, or someone wealthy had encountered me and remembered the ministry. It's not uncommon for someone who has been touched to want to anonymously support a work like mine. What I couldn't figure out was how. How they'd get my account number and bank name. I asked around the Phoenix Rescue Mission and nobody knew anything about it. I asked at Bank of America who was making the deposits, but they either couldn't or wouldn't answer me. They explained that an electronic transfer took place every month and there was no personal interaction from them to any person making the deposit. All they had was a routing number from another bank and no name. The sending bank, Wells Fargo, refused any information when I inquired, citing privacy laws. They wouldn't even acknowledge who their customers were when I suggested some names. I just took the money as providence from God, gave thanks, and spread most of it around every month to those I knew had need. I used a small amount for my own personal needs. It did not change my life at all. I had always eaten when I was hungry and slept when I was tired. Nothing was different except for the mystery. It was a Thursday afternoon when a knock came on my door. I opened it to a man in a gray suit holding a light brown manila envelope. "Mr. Jacob Benjamin Reynolds?" he queried. "Yes? I represent the law firm of Calhoun and White. Our clients, Mr. Hugh David Caldwell and his wife Catherine Teresa Caldwell, were tragically killed in that horrific riot and attack on American citizens in Buenos Aires, Argentina last week," he said. "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that. I loved the Caldwells so much," I said. "They were my in-laws." "Yes, sir, Mr. Reynolds. I need to inform you that enclosed in this envelope are instructions to the executor of their estate in the event of their death, their joint last will and testament, and information as to the access to and power of record for all their accounts, other possible heirs, and whatever instructions they wish to be followed in the untimely event of their deaths. They were in Argentina, opening up the South American headquarters of the corporation for which Mr. Caldwell was president and CEO, and Mrs. Caldwell was vice president and director. Mr. Reynolds, you are the executor of the Caldwell estate as appointed by both Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell 2.5 years ago when they rewrote their will. The gentleman advised. That meant they had written this document when Maya and I were still together. Their daughter and I are not together, sir. Perhaps they wouldn't want me as their executor any longer, I offered. This is their last will and testament, sir. It is in effect as of the moment of their deaths, the lawyer answered me. You are still legally married to Mrs. Reynolds, sir? There has never been a decree of divorce. Well, but I know nothing about running a corporation. I have no idea on earth what an executor is supposed to do, I said in exasperation. I encourage you to read the documents, Mr. Reynolds. Will you please come into our offices tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? Our team will meet with you. We have been appointed counsel, but we can only continue to serve as such with your consent and approval. There is much that needs attending to, and we will assist you with all the details if you are willing for us to serve you and advise you in the months ahead. I guess I can come in. "Where's your office located, Mr.? What was your name?" I replied, "My name is Stephen White, Mr. Reynolds, Stephen White." "No need to drive, sir. We will send a car for you at 8:40. You will have a car and driver at your disposal beginning this afternoon, sir," White said. I never went out on the street that night. I spent the entire night reading and praying. I read the cover letter from Mr. Caldwell, my appointment as executor, the joint last will and testament, and several pages of corporate papers, information on accounts, employees, and executives. It was quite a bit of information to take in. Much of what was in the will I did not understand. It was all legal mumbo-jumbo to me. It was all just a precursor to information that would soon follow. I did see that it was Hugh Caldwell who was my monthly benefactor, depositing the $6,000 into my account. He must have been able to get my account number after Maya and I were married. I had probably written a check or left my checkbook lying around when he was around, and he had obtained my information from that. I walked out of the Phoenix Rescue Mission at 8:35 the next morning, Friday. A large black Lincoln Town car was illegally parked right outside the front doors. The chauffeur was standing by an open door to the car, motioning for me to enter. I was embarrassed to have the hundreds of homeless folks I had been serving for years see me enter that car. I climbed into the car and found a poised young woman, Gabriella Scott, seated across from me. She greeted me warmly, introduced herself, and offered me coffee. She explained that she was my personal assistant, unless I preferred someone else, mentioning that I could choose from several options. Once we arrived at the offices of Calhoun and White, Gabriella had striking gray eyes, long black hair that fell to the middle of her back, and a polished, professional demeanor. She appeared to be around 31 years old, standing about 55 with a petite frame. Her smile was confident, her posture impeccable, and she carried herself with the kind of grace that suggested both competence and efficiency. Dressed in a well-tailored business suit, she embodied professionalism, though her skirt rode up slightly as she sat. Her focus remained entirely on the task at hand. From the moment we met, it was clear she was all business. Her role, as I quickly gathered, was to manage the details that made my day easier, ensuring my coffee was just right, keeping track of appointments, adjusting the car's temperature, and anticipating any preferences or needs I might have. In less than 15 minutes, we pulled in front of a large building off Central Avenue and McDowell Road in downtown Phoenix. The door opened and Mr. White greeted me, shaking my hand and welcoming me to Calhoun and White. When I walked into the conference room, there were 8 men and 8 secretaries, one behind each man, around the table. And Maya Reynolds, my estranged wife. Gabriella was to sit behind me. The conference room Maya, the willful fox that she was, walked over to me with teary eyes and then wept as we hugged. No words were exchanged for the moment. Her parents were dead. Our marriage was in shambles. No divorce had ever been filed. She was embarrassed beyond belief, and it would seem her future was in my hands. After a few moments, Mr. White suggested we begin the meeting. Maya went to her chair at the other end of the long table. I was seated at the head. Mr. White began the meeting. He introduced me as the executor of the estate, read the proclamation, or whatever it was called, and then read the will in painful detail, every last page of it. It took quite a while. The people in the room were the lead corporate officers and directors of Caldwell Enterprises, as well as their secretaries. Maya was there as the only child and apparent heir, but a twist in the will left her nothing without my express declaration. After the reading of the will, Mr. White presented me with a sealed envelope that simply read, "To Jacob Reynolds. To be opened only on the occasion of the death of Hugh David Caldwell and Catherine Teresa Caldwell." It was dated 2.5 years earlier. "This is not a legal document," Mr. White said. "Whatever is in this letter is personal and will have to wait for later, since there is pressing business at hand." I handed it to Gabriella for safekeeping. Stepping into power first, I had to sign a document agreeing to be executor. Then, a series of documents authorizing me to, in the interim, head the corporation, appoint general counsel, handle accounts, and make general decisions as to the future of Caldwell Enterprises. I had to sign a document agreeing that my fee as executor and temporary president, CEO, would be 25% of whatever the final liquidation figure of the estate became. That figure to be about $910 million plus change. The Caldwells were 78% owners of the corporation, and with various properties, corporate stock, and cash on hand, they were worth $3.45 billion as of the date of their deaths. Here's the kicker. Maya didn't get anything without my say-so. I didn't exactly know how that worked, but the lawyers were adamant that it was sound and irrevocable. Maya sat there and stared at me, mouth agape. I sat there and stared at her, mouth agape. Damn it. The boardroom decision. We had a board of directors meeting right then and there. I stated that I am not a businessman. I have no experience and no desire to become one. I directed that the corporation be put on the block and sold for fair market value. I asked for discussion and then assigned each board member their duties to contact customers, creditors, debtors, stockholders, and competitors about the potential sale of the corporation. The lawyer, Mr. White, sat there looking completely dumbfounded. After I finished my discussion, I asked if I could use the conference room for a while. He hesitated but eventually agreed. I asked Gabriella to give Maya and me some privacy. The confrontation. Maya, it's good to see you again, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She started reaching for a hug and a kiss. I took a step back. Maya, if you're going to see a dime, you have to go into a 6-month intensive treatment for alcohol and substance abuse and complete it. You will need to be sober for 1 full year, or more if I feel unsure about you after you complete your treatment, before I authorize the release of any funds to you other than basic maintenance, I stated solemnly. You can't. What are you talking about? I am no alcoholic. I am the sole heir. You cannot do this. It is mine, and you cannot stand in the way, she growled. I held up the letter from her parents. Maya, let's open this letter from your parents. I'd be interested to hear their thoughts at the time they wrote it. Sit down, I ordered. The letter. Dear Jacob, if you are reading this, it means both of us have passed away. We do not feel Maya is capable of making quality decisions of the magnitude that she would need to make if something serious happened to one or both of us. Jacob, it is no secret to you that Maya is in trouble with alcohol. Maybe narcotics. She isn't a daily user, but when she falls hard. After her assault, when you killed those men while rescuing her, then endured the abuse, questioning, and suspicion of authorities, we realized we had never met a man who hadn't tried to take advantage of her. We're sure you will agree that Maya is a beautiful woman, and she has had men at her beck and call all her life. You are the one and only man who never catered to her every whim. Your grounding served to ground her, mostly except for that last time you saw her after that Monday night football game. She was humiliated and ashamed, as were we when she told us about it. We've come to understand that Maya is in a lifelong struggle that she could lose at any moment. Her beauty will always elevate her without effort. Her weaknesses will always be glossed over. And her lack of innate good sense will always be a threat to her well-being. We feel that you are the one soul on God's earth who truly has her best interest at heart. Help her, Jacob. Help her as only you seem to be able to do. Get her help. Lend her your strength. Make her get the help she needs, whatever it takes. Remember your vow, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, until death do you part. If she just won't face her demons and you cannot win her over, then use the money to spread the gospel. You have our blessing. This is not a legal document, but the will is. This is simply a letter spelling out our heart's desire for the true welfare of our beloved daughter, Maya. Please help her. Help her in the way she needs help. Whatever it takes. You have our love and trust. Hugh Caldwell, Catherine Caldwell, Maya cried. So did I. At that moment, the task ahead of me seemed insurmountable. She looked at me and began to speak. Jacob, I don't know where to start. How do I become what I should be? A turning point. Without answering her, I rose from my chair and went to the door of the room. Gabriella, would you step back in here, please? Yes, Mr. Reynolds. Mrs. Reynolds. Gabriella nodded at Maya. They made eye contact. Gabriella, I'd like a list of the 4 or 5 best substance abuse centers in the world. I hear there's a cutting-edge hospital in Zurich. I want to know all about that one. And use your resources to find the best, newest, and most advanced techniques available. Maya's eyes widened. Her makeup had run from all the tears, and she looked a bit of a fright. She had never seen me so proactive, except for that one time I fought those thugs in the parking lot, killing 2. She had never seen me as anything but docile. She had forgotten the wild look in my eyes that night when I instructed her to duck and then swung. Today, she was taken off guard. Taking control, sir? Mr. Reynolds? Gabriella said. I thought I detected a hint of excitement in her tone. Have the car come around to pick me up. If you need to reach me, call me at the mission. I hardly slept all night praying about all this, so I'm going back to my room and taking a nap. I need to be back on the streets tonight. I was tired. I knew there were wolves about and I was but a sheep. I think the wolves were trying to figure out a strategy for me and weren't ready for any attack at this point anyway. It wasn't that often that the sheep attacked the wolf, and that is how they saw today's events, I'm sure. That which was meant for your harm, I will turn into good. I looked at my wife and nodded a goodbye. I'll be in touch, was all I said. Then I left the room. Gabriella followed after me. Mr. Reynolds, will you need me to accompany you, sir? Gabriella asked. No. Just get me the information I asked for, Gabriella. I do not want the car after today. I'll use my own car or catch a bus. I'll see you on Monday or Tuesday afternoon back here at these offices. Where's your personal office so I can find you? She told me she was part of a secretarial pool and did not have an office. I asked her if I had one. Yes, you do, Mr. Reynolds. It is right here, off the conference room. Okay. That is now your office too, Gabriella, I said. Get me Mr. White, please. Making moves within 1 minute into my office stepped a very worn-out-looking Stephen White. I asked if he was okay. He just said his lunch didn't settle too well. From now until I complete this task, Gabriella will use my office as her own. If I need anything, I'll go through her. And if you need to talk to me, talk to her. She will know how to reach me. By the way, how much does she make? Oh, I really don't know, Mr. Reynolds. I imagine around $60,000 per year, what most of the secretaries make. He answered, eyeing her warily. From today, she makes $15,000 per month plus full benefits, I said. Her eyes opened wide, and I think I heard her inhale sharply. It may have been White who reacted, though I detected an aroma of nervous energy. Establishing loyalty, White left the room, and it was just Gabriella and me alone. Gabriella, I just ask you to be loyal and available. Get us each a private cell phone. Only you and I will have each other's numbers. I can reach you, and you can reach me at any time. I need your promise to answer this phone if I call. Will you? Yes, of course, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you so much for that confidence. And that raise, she said. It's okay. I trust you, Gabriella. Just get on those treatment centers. Anything else? No, sir. Thank you, she replied. I went back to the mission and to bed for a good nap, then out onto the streets where my heart was free and my soul was joined to those who needed to hear from the Good Shepherd. A mysterious guardian, I noticed that I was being watched while I was out. Every night I had a tale. One night I was passing out sandwiches and thermoses of hot soup, and one of the more derelict of the derelicts took a swing at me with a 2x4. He was in the act of robbing me of the rest of the sandwiches and soup. I was on the ground from the blow I received, and the next thing I saw was this guy in a suit. He dispatched the derelict and was tending to my bleeding head wound as I came around. I asked him who he was, and he just chuckled. Your guardian angel, Mr. Reynolds. Just your guardian angel. Then he walked off. A shocking revelation when the ambulance showed up to take me to Phoenix General Hospital. I found out years later that Gabriella had paid him out of her own salary to watch out for me when I was on the streets. My private phone was ringing. It was 7:30 a.m. I'd been out until 2 a.m. with God's little lambs. It was Gabriella. Mr. Reynolds, it's Gabriella. Sorry to bother you, but Maya is demanding to talk to you, sir. She insists that she needs some money. I think she sounded a little drunk, sir. Could you call her or talk to her, sir? Gabriella asked in one breath. Tell me what all she said, Gabriella. I yawned. She was obviously drinking, sir. She slurred her words and was telling me that you are unfair and not in a rightful place to withhold her fortune from her. She said she wouldn't go into any damn treatment, and you couldn't make her. She threatened me, sir, and said if I knew what was good for me, I'd better convince you to relent and turn loose of her funds, or else. Gabriella's voice shook. I don't know, or else what, sir? Where is she now, Gabriella? I asked. She says she is at home in Scottsdale. Okay, I'll handle it. Gabriella, write out a check for $2,500. I'll be by in an hour or so to pick it up, I instructed. I hung up and went to the community shower to clean up. My day was starting early. I had to wait a while because there were about 25 men ahead of me in line to use the facilities. Facing Maya again when I picked up the check at Calhoun and White, Stephen White stopped me and asked me to sign some documents relating to the corporation. I told him to have Gabriella lay them on my desk and I'd get to them later. That I had something to do right then. He bowed slightly and said he needed my signature right away. Stay down, Mr. White, I said. I'll get to them later today, I barked. It was obviously a reaction he did not expect. I could see seething in his eyes. Call the board together for 3 p.m. today, Mr. White, I commanded. You can't just call a meeting without an agenda, Mr. Reynolds. You need to give notice, and we need to establish a central theme for the meeting, he said. The agenda is discussing council's replacement, Mr. White, I said. I got in my Toyota Camry and drove off, leaving him curbside, standing there in astonishment. The party scene when I got to Maya's house, our house, in Scottsdale, she didn't answer. Her car was in the garage. Other cars were parked around the house, but she did not respond to my repeated knocks and doorbell ringing. I went around to the back and found the sliding glass door into the kitchen unlocked. So I stepped in. The place smelled like stale sex, booze, and cigarettes. There were unwashed glasses with all sorts of unfinished drinks. Beer and wine bottles littered the counters and the living room. It must have been some party. On my way through the living room, I noticed a young woman and a man, both passed out on the couch, tangled up together. They were completely unconscious, lost in a deep sleep, oblivious to the world around them. No doorbell or noise was going to wake them from their drunken slumber. I glanced into the spare bedroom and saw two couples sound asleep, sprawled out in a heap on the bed and floor. The room was in complete disarray, clothes, bottles, and other remnants of the night scattered everywhere. It was a scene that spoke for itself, a testament to the chaos of whatever had happened hours before. Finding Maya when I reached the master bedroom, there lay Maya, still peaceful and undeniably beautiful. The last time I had seen her like this was at the Cardinals' party. The memory lingered in my mind. In all the years I had known Maya, she had always been distant, never showing much emotion. But now, in the quiet of the morning, there was something different about her presence, something I couldn't quite place. Nobody else stirred. I took the check made out to Maya Reynolds out of my jacket pocket and signed it. I laid the check on the bedside table and left my ink pen on it. Maya had passed out again. A moment of clarity. I was hungry, so I treated myself to Village Inn pancakes and eggs with bacon, orange juice, and hot coffee. Then I headed back over to Calhoun and White's law offices. Gabriella had a stack of papers for my perusal and signature. White had meekly left his papers for me to sign. She laughed and asked me what I had said to him to make him so meek. I thought I detected the sweet aroma of female excitement. I did not answer her. I just dove into the reading and signing where appropriate. I was pushing to get this empire sold off and liquidated. I did not want the responsibility and the distraction from what I deemed important. The board meeting at 3 p.m. The board and their secretaries were present in the conference room. White knocked on my door and entered my office, informing me of their presence. His demeanor had changed considerably. Maya, of course, was not in attendance. Nobody could get a hold of her. I started the meeting off with a question to the various board members and corporate executives about how their search for a buyer was going. It seemed very favorable. They reported that one competitor in particular was both very interested in acquiring the company and well able to financially swing the deal. I asked for particulars and gave the go-ahead to a team of 3 to meet with them and report back to Gabriella with the progress of negotiations. Gabriella swooned when I told them that all communication to me went through her. She, a 32-year-old woman, just a pool secretary a few weeks before, was now an executive secretary with chief of staff responsibilities. What I knew was in everyone's mind was, how had she managed to get to me so early? And how was I in bed? Or rather, how was she in bed? I smelled the odor of love. I was sure. The decision on counsel then. I brought up the matter of counsel. White began to fidget. I had a copy of the documents that assigned me the rights to be executor and temporary CEO and president of the company. I had the contract on the top of the stack that named Calhoun and White as legal counsel for the estate and corporation. I asked the question, is everyone happy with counsel? Nobody expected that except White. Nobody answered. They just looked around at each other. I am inclined to begin a search for new and different counsel. Sometimes, I sense a striving against my efforts here, and I want to put the board on notice that I do not intend to struggle along with adversaries. I would like to hear some thoughts about this, even if it is a brand new subject to you. I welcome your opinion now, because later I might consider any misdirection to be covert. Let's get our opinions out where we can examine them in the light of day. One of the directors, Robert Gibbs, whom I respected and who seemed a worthy fellow, stated, "Well, Mr. Reynolds, Calhoun and White was the Caldwell's chosen attorneys. What would Mr. Caldwell want?" There seemed to be a consensus with that statement. I am experiencing a pushback against me from them. That they do not agree with my course of action is obvious. However, it rests with me to maximize the remaining assets of this corporation and the Caldwell estate. So far as I see it, their daughter, my wife, is incapable of managing this empire. And I am unqualified to run it as well. But it is mine to do so. I will do it. But it is going to be the way I feel is best, or I'll replace those who stand in the way. Feedback? No eyes met mine after that. Okay, let's get this thing sold and move on. Calhoun and White, you will remain counsel for now, but you are on notice. If I detect subterfuge, I will terminate this agreement immediately without notice. Gabriella, I want a copy of the minutes of this meeting sent to each and every person sitting in this room and a copy sent to my wife, Maya Reynolds, too. Yes, sir, Gabriella replied, closing the board meeting. Other business? I asked. Silence. Adjourned, I said. Back in my office, Gabriella told me that Maya had been hounding her about how to get a hold of me. I advised Gabriella that I did not think Maya would bother her too much in the future except when she needed money. If Maya wants to see me, she can come downtown any night. She knows where I preach, where I stand, and where I minister. A private invitation. One more thing, Gabriella, I asked. Is there anything you need specifically? Are they treating you okay here? Are you suffering any abuse because of their dislike of me? I don't suffer any abuse, but they don't have much to do with me. If they have something for you, they run it through me and then leave. They don't stick around. I take my breaks alone because they are afraid of me a little, I think, she said. You okay with all that? I asked. You bet. I can handle it, she said. I loved her smell. The invite stands for you to come downtown and join me sometime. No additional pay, but the rewards are endless. I'll be at 19th and Monroe tonight. It is a rough part of town, so call me and let me know if you're coming first, so I can meet you somewhere and we can go together. I said, for now, I need to go back and get a power nap. Hope to see you downtown sometime. I'll think about it, she replied. Oh, Gabriella, dress down. Dress down? She asked. You are pretty, Gabriella. Make yourself plain. Don't stick out down there. You need bland colors and to hide your curves. No need to make yourself a target. Okay? Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks for the advice. And thanks for the compliment, I think. I laughed. She looked at me. I left. A homeless woman and an unexpected visitor. Maya found me praying with a homeless woman 3 nights later. I was just in an alleyway off 17th and Fillmore. She was a bag lady. She had sores on her feet and was retaining fluids. Her heart was slowly giving out and she just couldn't pump away the water from her lungs and heart. It is a condition called congestive heart failure. It is common among street people, especially older ones. When I took Margaret's hand, I put a card with my name in it. I told her it would get her into the Phoenix Medical Center's Heart Treatment Center and that I'd be by and arrange for whatever financial help she needed based on their recommended course of treatment. Margaret, if you use this for narcotics or alcohol, I won't be available anymore at all, okay? This is for you to get into the Heart Center at Phoenix Medical. Go there now. Weeping, she left her shopping cart full of junk as I hailed the cab. I told the driver, Phoenix Medical Center, emergency room. Silently, I said a prayer to send her on her way. A difficult conversation. There stood Maya, hands in her pockets, tears streaming down her pretty face. She looked so pretty, tall, well-dressed. She looked like a dream, but in her face were legions of tormenting thoughts, doubt and fear. Pretty on the outside, mush on the inside. Jake, I saw the check, and that you were at the house the other day. She trailed off. Maya, you need help. If you don't get it, you are going to die. You could die from alcohol poisoning. You had a .32 blood alcohol level 3 years ago when we met. How much worse is it now? You could die from AIDS or any number of diseases that people pass around nowadays. Is there a chance for us, Jake? If I get help and clean up and straighten my act out? She cried, begging with her eyes. I don't know what went through your mind when we got married. You were sexually cold to me. You never let on like it was something you enjoyed. I was fooled. I found you drunk and in trouble. You managed to stay on the right path for a while. But then you stumbled, and your behavior became reckless. That night after the Cardinals game, I watched you in the crowd. You were completely lost in the moment, caught up in the chaos around you. I know. I have strong desires. Always have. But I saw you as someone pure, someone righteous. Being close to you felt almost sacred, like something beyond my understanding. I didn't know how to act or what to do. I was afraid that my emotions and intensity would push you away, so I buried them. But I could only hold back for so long before everything came crashing down. Then I lost control completely, she admitted. The final offer, Maya, let me find you a good treatment center. Let's get you in where you are safe and away from this environment. Let some professional people talk with you. You talk with them. Please, let's give this a try. But will you wait for me, Jake? She asked. Maya, you need to do this for Maya. The prize at the end of successful treatment is successful living. Set your goal to be your own woman. Make up your mind who you are, who you want to be, and where you want to go. Maya, I cannot say that you and I will be together. If I had to make a choice tonight, I'd say no, we won't. I am committed to your welfare, to your care if you let up on your treatment. I am willing to help you for a while, but soon I'll be gone, and you will not have any of what you've had. Not financial, not emotional. Could be really tough. I suggest you think this through very seriously. You'll have a maintenance account set up for your month-to-month expenses for the rest of your life. You'll have a home, a new car occasionally, food, your bills paid, your health insurance paid. You won't have leftover funds to play like you play when you play. But this is only if you refuse help. If you can get help and be successful at it, you will be wealthy beyond your imagination. She spat at me. How can you do this to me? How can you withhold from me what is rightfully mine? Who do you think you are, judging me? Then immediately she changed. No, I understand what you were saying. I am in trouble. I need help. I know it is for my good. A decision is made. Go home and pack a bag, Maya. We'll be getting you into treatment in the next couple of days as soon as we can make arrangements. We hugged right there on the street in downtown Phoenix. She kissed me a soft, closed-mouth kiss. Then she opened her mouth, slipped the tip of her tongue between my lips, and sucked in huge lungfuls of air. We broke our embrace, and she turned and walked to her car. She never looked back. I never took my eyes off her. I watched her until she disappeared around a corner 2 blocks away. The sale of the corporation sold above the estimated market value. With interest and appreciation of the properties involved, the estate liquidated at $3.92 billion. That was $980 million to me. Maya disappeared into thin air. I hired a private investigation agency and asked them to put their best people on the task of finding my wife. I told them to spare no expense and leave no stone unturned. Find her. After 8 months and $1 million, there was not a trace of her anywhere. Her social security number never surfaced. Her credit cards were never used. No shoes, no clothes, no phone signal, no nothing. She vanished. The confirmation of her fate after 8 years. I petitioned the courts to have her declared legally dead. While we were preparing to go before the court, the Coconino County Sheriff's Office in northern Arizona began an investigation concerning the bones of a female found by hikers in a ravine at the bottom of Eldon Mountain. Her purse was found about 200 feet from the body, with Maya's various IDs. DNA tests confirmed it was the body of Maya Reynolds, that the body had been there for several years. Her burned-out car was 1,200 feet further up the mountain, caught on some rocks, hidden from view by snow in the winter, vegetation, and rocky ledges in the summer. She had been thrown from the car as it tumbled down the mountain, ending in that ravine. The death was ruled an accident. Maya had driven off a cliff to her death sometime after meeting me that night in downtown Phoenix or within a couple of weeks afterward. Tests for alcohol or narcotics were inconclusive. A billionaire with a mission, the remaining 75% of the Caldwell estate, after interest and appreciation over those 8 years, was worth $3.8 billion. I was the sole heir to the Caldwell fortune. Taxes were minimal, limited to the growth on the funds alone, since the government had passed new laws eliminating estate tax and reducing capital gains taxes just before all this happened. There was just a whole lot of money on hand, at my discretion. I continued staying at the Phoenix Rescue Mission for those 8 years, but after Maya was found, I decided to do something bigger. Changing the world, I purchased a large block of buildings close to the other rescue missions. We built a men's shelter and a women's and children's shelter. Each had its own apartments, cooking areas, and common areas. The city of Phoenix and some of the surrounding suburbs wanted in on this, so they contributed tax dollars. Soon, the shelters were a model for other states and cities. We had visits from other government entities, and soon, We were building shelters in 20 other cities. San Diego, Las Vegas, Denver, Houston, Dallas, Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, Seattle, Portland, New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, Memphis, Nashville, Cleveland, Charlotte, St. Louis, New Orleans, Detroit. All of these were based on our model, but each city adapted some of its own ideas into the plans. We funded 50% to 75% of all those projects, depending on each city's situation. Then, after all the work was done, after all 20 cities had in place substantial shelters and feeding programs for the homeless men and women, we forgave their debts, gifting our share of their financing to them. It was a windfall for the cities and, hopefully, would guarantee the programs would continue to grow and prosper. A presidential recognition. Gabriella and I even met with the president and vice president in the Oval Office. It was good exposure and highlighted the problems with homelessness in America. Gabriella stayed with me as my employee and confidant. She never dated anyone and made sure I knew she was available to me day or night. A love that lasted. When Maya's body was found, I began dating Gabriella. Gabriella was everything to me that Maya wasn't. First, Gabriella was sexually hot for me through the years. And being together so often in private and public, Gabriella became aroused. I could smell her arousal, that ancient tool God gave to creatures of the same species for procreation. Unseen and unheard ways to communicate the opportunity to mate. Pheromones. She would always flush and avoid eye contact with me when arousal overcame her. For 8 years, it was a struggle for me. We were employer and employee, but also friends. She knew me well, having seen me at my most vulnerable. Though the dynamic was never truly equal. A wedding like no other. Gabriella and I got married on the steps of the homeless shelter we had built in Phoenix. The ceremony was presided over by an old alcoholic minister who had ended up on the streets and then turned his life around again. Gabriella's bridesmaids were all friends of hers. My groomsmen were all homeless folks I had ministered to over the years. We set up a huge table of food in the downtown Phoenix park at 12th and Roosevelt. A life of love and purpose. Gabriella and I have sex nearly every single day. We can't get enough of each other. We still minister on the streets, preferring to position ourselves close to home and sporting events. We also manage a huge fortune and pray constantly for guidance on where to contribute and how much. We look to enable people and resist the organized religious establishment. We are in our 40s and don't plan on having children. But we do not use protections or pills, so what happens, happens. Thanks for watching. Was this fate or just second chances? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.